So guys, for my YouTube channel, I have something called Tough Stories, and I'm actually going to revamp how I do this because there's two ways I do tough stories that, yes, I've done these as revenge videos, and I've done this to be a little vindictive, but I'm kind of learning too that, there's been a lot of ways that I've been taught in life, and there's also been, thought processes that I've had that have been like really really toxic, really, so if I can encourage positivity or a good message, then I should be doing videos. If it's just going to be negative bitching, I shouldn't be doing these videos. So I want to talk about the time I got into a car crash, and I also want to talk about the aftermath of that, and like how I was angry with my father because he was mad that I decided to do an insurance claim on the whole thing, really. So what happened was that I was in New Haven, Connecticut, and there's like the Hamden Stop and Shop, and that's kind of where like there's Starbucks and ShopRite and all those other places. So what happened was that somebody was speeding. They had to be like over 50 miles an hour, and they crashed into like the rear-ended my Uber. And what happened was that I remember going forward, I blacked out a bit. I was kind of delirious. I had a stomach ache. And it felt like I had a nosebleed without having a nosebleed. And the person who did that, when he got out of the car, the front of the car was destroyed, the back of the car was destroyed. He tried shaking my hand. He tried shaking the hand of the driver and being like, "Oh, nothing happened. Let's walk away. Walk away." Like he wasn't taking a lot of responsibility for it. And I actually walked away from the scene because of two things. That I was always kind of raised to be a tough man, really. So I kind of told myself, if I'm going on a stretcher, it's going to make me look like, a weak little wimp. I don't want people like being like, boo hoo hoo, we feel sorry for Byron because he's going to a stretcher, really. Like you tough it out. If you get hit by a car or if you're involved in a car crash or a plane crash, you walk it off because, you got a penis. And part of having a penis means that you suck it up and you deal with it. Car crash, you toughen it up and be a man. Well, first of all, that's extremely dumbass because, even though I walked away from that, years ago, you always have to get medical attention, really. And, even if it is something where you have to pay for it first or whatever. But never ever do that, because then the other thing too is that there's something severe, they can catch it and hold the person accountable. And also too, like one thing I learned from car crashes is that, if you survive it and if you have the energy, always take pictures, always record it, do Facebook Live, do YouTube Live, do all that stuff. Because the thing is, you can always take screenshots and then you can always see how the driver's reacting. So if they're trying to smack the phone out of your hand, if they're trying to be defensive, they're going to be like, "Oh, I'm going to kill you if you don't put the phone away," or other shit like that. Or you see them shaking hands with people like, "Oh, well, let it go, let it go." You play that in court, really, and then the judge is going to be like, "Hey, you know what? You got to get extra, compensation because, the motherfucker's not taking responsibility for his actions and all that." That's important, really. So those are like two big things I'll tell you about is that number one, always get medical attention. Number two, if you still walk and you're still like delirious and whatever, and you can still move and function, take pictures, do Facebook Live, do YouTube Live. And the reason why you do that is that there is live footage. So that way, if somebody hits your camera or whatever, really, or trying to take it away because they're like, "Oh, well, I don't want you recording like the accident that I caused," really. That way you have something online and it also shows their reaction to it. One of the other things I want to talk about is that, I remember doing a couple of things. That number one, I had a really shitty lawyer in downtown New Haven. And the thing about it was that he got me like $4,000 of it. And then part of it was like, he kept like 1/3 of it. And then the other part of it was that I went to I forgot what it's called really, but like a chiropractor, and they were doing things like they were pinching my fingers and saying things like, "Oh, well, that's a clear sign that you're in pain," whatever. And they just said like my spine is out of line and whatever, and that was not really the case, really. And they were just giving like 15 minutes of like chiropractor work and sending me out the door, really. But the thing about it is that a few months later, they sent me like a bill for like over $1,000, and my lawyer was like, "You got to pay that, or I'm going to sue you because that was part of the deal, really." I also work for the state of Connecticut. So at that time, when I was working for the state of Connecticut, it's weird because, they have good health benefits. So it's almost like, how am I paying $1,000 out of pocket, really? So it's almost like, what the fuck, really? But the other part of it is that my father, I told him about it, and I also told him that I was filing a claim, and then he said something like, "Oh, well, why are you doing this? You're being vindictive. You're not angry. You're just angry because this person wasn't sorry." And this kind of goes to a theme I've talked about many times in my life, which is the Chris Rock parenting. Everybody hates Chris parenting. I'm going to call it that. Where if I do something disrespectful, I have to be held accountable for my actions. But if other people hurt me, sexually harass me, almost kill me in the car crash, I gotta not be vindictive. I gotta be the better man. And we all understand why that's a horrible way of teaching, because it's a horrible way of teaching because it doesn't hold other people accountable. It says that there's double standards for how you operate and how you have to forgive. And no, because then it also says, well, this driver who did all this shit, if we don't hold him accountable, then he's going to do more things. Like my brother married this girl, and what would happen if they had a baby, and then the same driver, was speeding down the road, hurt both of them, and then the baby, they're not having a kid yet, but what happened if that baby died? What happened if that baby had, mental health issues? I know this girl that has half a brain literally because she got in a car crash as a child, but what would happen if they have a kid and they're walking and they're stumbling and they're doing all that stuff? And then I'm like, hey, that's the same driver, but my father, Kevin Patrick, told me years ago, oh, well, you need to forgive and let it go. Then everybody look at him like, what the fuck, man? Like, this driver, he could have been held accountable years ago. He could have learned a lesson, but because you're teaching Byron to be Ned Flanders, you're teaching him to be Chris Rock from Everybody Hates Chris, forgive and let go, really. We live in this world. You don't hold people accountable, and then bad things happen, really. So, hold people accountable for their actions. Whenever you're in a car crash, if you have the energy, do Facebook Live, do YouTube Live, so everybody can see what's going on, really. And then you can take, screenshots. Then you can kind of download it to your phone when you're in a better condition. Always seek medical help. And importantly, sue reasonably and get insurance claims reasonably. And what I mean is, you don't do that thing too where, I got another car crash where somebody sideswiped, and I took pictures, and I was honest as possible that I felt a headache afterwards, but I didn't say something I didn't lie, I didn't embellish, really. But I held the woman who hit me, sideswiped the car, years after the first accident, accountable, because that's what you got to do, really, or else that person does not learn their lesson, really. Forgiveness is important. Forgiveness is very, very important. But you have to hold people accountable. And I'm also proud of myself because I could have easily gotten on my phone and I could have found in an email the court case and just put the name of the person on here. I could have done something like take pictures and be like, okay, I'm going to call this guy's job up and email their job and says, hey, this is how your worker behaves, really. And then get that guy fired, really. Because I watch I think This Advice Show, it's now called African Diaspora News Network, and he encouraged people to do that for a while in America, there were Karens, there were white people being racist. So he always say, hey, what you do is you take pictures of these people, you research who they are, really, and then you go online and you find their bosses or things that they're into. Like if they run film festivals or they volunteer, you let these people know and be like, hey, this is the person that you're hiring. Because the reason why he said that was because Dr. Martin Luther King incurred economic boycott, and that's what caused the Montgomery boycott to desegregate. Holding people accountable by getting them fired is a form of economic discrimination. It teaches them, okay, well, now you got to struggle to get a new job. Now you got to spend years of your life rebuilding, and maybe that's going to teach you because there's there's a multi-year consequence. But the problem is that could be considered slander, defamation of character. That could also be a counter lawsuit, being like saying, hey, somebody makes $100,000 a year, but somebody is intentionally sabotaging somebody. And then the other issue is that we all make mistakes, really. Anybody can research anything about anybody online, really. Like sometimes when we're in high school, we do senior pranks and we do screw around a little bit. So how would I like it if there was footage from me in high school doing crazy stuff, and somebody showed my current employer that, and they're like, oh well, even though this happened, you know, um, over 20 years ago, we got to fire you, so sometimes you have to think about, not being too vindictive as well, really. But the ultimate message I'm saying is hold people accountable for their actions, in the right balance, really. Don't do what my father did, which was, be pissed off that I'm filing a lawsuit against somebody, an insurance claim, because like I said, what about the guy's car whose car got destroyed? He's probably getting like 10 grand, really. Oh, well, I can't be in that same boat, really. I can't hold this person accountable for almost killing me. And like I said before, my brother got married, so if he has a baby and my dad wants to be a grandpa really badly, what would happen if that baby got killed by that guy, really? Because the guy decides to get into another like vehicle accident, and then I say, hey, this is the same guy who did it to me. You were vindictive to me, really. What would happen if we held this guy accountable? And then he's learned, okay, well, I'm down like over $10,000, $20,000. Now I should think about like how I drive in the future, really. Hold people accountable for their actions.